Hi, welcome to Sversity. Sversity is a service from Koyya Enterprises to aid you in learning technologies. In the series of MERN Frontend Fundamentals, in this session, we'll be looking at JavaScript. We'll be quickly reviewing JavaScript. It is not to introduce JavaScript for the people who never worked with JavaScript, rather than it is a refresher for people who have worked with JavaScript briefly in the past, at least. So the agenda is, we'll start with history as usual. Then we'll be looking at basics. Then we'll be looking at JavaScript data structures, a small illustration, summary, and next steps. The history of JavaScript is very interesting. It's very dramatic, in fact. Way back in the 1993, Mosaic was the only and first browser for the Windows or for the people to access the World Wide Web. Though it was only just showing the static HTML pages, but that was an essential software that everybody expected on their browsers. It's a common man's browser, in fact. Means nowadays people also can just install on their machines and use it. The people who developed Mosaic later set up a company called Netscape, and they have their own, they renamed their browser as Netscape Navigator. In the meantime, the desktop machines were majorly running what do you call Windows or the DOS systems, right? So so Microsoft felt that instead of distributing a browser from another organization, they also thought of coming up with their own browser. So sensing that there will be a competition from Microsoft, Netscape people wanted to make Mosaic a little better or superior. And that's how they introduced a scripting engine. Internally, it was known as Mocha initially, but officially it came to known as LiveScript. It happened in 1995. So LiveScript is a scripting engine in a way. It adds behavior to the web pages after they got loaded onto the browser. To gain more market attention, they renamed LiveScript as JavaScript at a later point, so that Java is or was very popular in that time. So they just want to leverage that word. Of course, in consultation with the owners of Java, that was Sun Microsystems. So now what happened? The situation happened in such a way that the Microsoft now has the option of having its own browser, of course. But since the Netscape is having a browser with much more power, Microsoft left with no other option. They also need to have such kind of a power. So what they did is like they simply reverse engineered JavaScript and they named it as JScript. And introduced into their own browser that was later came to known as Internet Explorer. That means in the world now you have two major scripting engines, JScript and JavaScript. So if I write a program, if I write a web application, or if I write a web page with some sort of behavior, if I use JavaScript, it runs on Netscape browsers. If I use JScript, it runs perfectly well on Windows, but vice versa, there was no guarantee. So at that time, Netscape submitted the JavaScript to ECMA International for standardization. So instead of having two different engines growing in two different directions, they wanted to get it standardized. But by that time, Internet Explorer became so popular that about 90% of the browser market was occupied by the Microsoft at the time. So they did not want to really cooperate with the ECMA standardization process because they know they don't lose anything, right? They are anyway the winners of the market at that time. So since Netscape Navigator lost most of its market share, it simply vanished. But since many of the people still feel at the time that Netscape Navigator technically was superior compared to Internet Explorer, so some technology enthusiasts, they started a foundation called Mozilla Foundation, and they took a lot of code base from Netscape Navigator and re-engineered or enhanced it and released as a new browser called Firefox, which became an instantaneously successful browser. At some point of time, Firefox was getting somewhere around 40% of the market, and Internet Explorer started losing the market share from 90% to somewhere about 40% on that side also. You have other browsers by that time, right? Safari, Opera, and other things are also occupying that remaining 10-20% of the market. In the meantime, Google also came up with its own browser, Google Chrome, and that became so dominant over a period of time that Internet Explorer more or less vanished. So now what happened in the market? You have the Chrome browser and Firefox browsers and other browsers. They were all using JavaScript as the engine, and they were all together along with Microsoft. By this time, Microsoft also started cooperating, and they all together joined hands and got it standardized. And finally, the 6th version of ECMA script succeeded in this front in 2015. So all the 5 versions of ECMA script standards were not really adopted, not really accepted by any of these parties, most of these parties. But 6th version by this time, by 2015, it got acceptance from majority of the players. And since then, JavaScript, no matter in which browser it is running, it follows, or every vendor of the browser is supposed to, or expected to, are following the standard that is ECMA, popularly known as ECMA 2015 standard, or ES6 that is called. And it is from there onward, since then it is getting revised every year. Now you have ECMA 2021 was the most stable version as of today, as far as I know. All right, so this is a brief history of JavaScript. One thing that is certain is that JavaScript is one of the backbones, one of the core technologies for web browsers, along with HTML and CSS. Along with HTML and CSS. Without HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, there is no way you can write a useful web application for browsers. Having said that, now let us look at some basics of JavaScript. JavaScript files, when you write them as external code files, you use .js as extension. Even though the story of JavaScript begins with browser, and it always was, it was always run within browsers, but now it's no longer the story. JavaScript runs either on the browsers or outside of the browsers also. If it is on the client machine, obviously it runs on the browser. If it is on the server machine, you typically use environment like Node or Node.js, right, to run the JavaScript. So browsers execute it on the client devices, typically by embedding the script into the HTML documents. You will be using this script tag for embedding the external JavaScript files, or you can write the JavaScript inline within the script tags within the HTML document itself. Anywhere you can write, but typically you write it in the header section. And if it is a Node.js, you need to run the JavaScript by using the command node and just by supplying the JS file. Typically on the Node side, when you run the JavaScript, it is what happens is that it basically executes it as like any other program, like how you execute C or C++ or Java program. On the server side, typically the JavaScript code that you write deals with the operating system calls, database calls, web server calls, or processing the web browser requests, and etc. Another important basic point of JavaScript is that it is a dynamic language. What does it mean? It is not a statically typed language, unlike the way that you see it in the C kind of languages. You never declare variables as if like they belong to certain type. It never happens. Instead, the JavaScript interpreter or its corresponding JIT compilers, they themselves detect what is the type of a particular variable at runtime. That's why we call it as dynamic language. It doesn't mean that JavaScript do not have types. It has types like numbers, strings, bools, objects, and others, but you need not to declare them. You don't have a way to declare them in a way, to put it clearly. All right, JavaScript is fundamentally interpreted language, but of late, Chrome brought in something called V8 engine, which also comes with something called JIT compiler or just-in-time compiler to make the performance a little more better than that. But fundamentally, it is interpreted language. As a developer, if you want to use an IDE, the recommendation is to use Visual Studio Code. Okay, and the link for you to locate the ECMA standards for the JavaScript. Now let us look at from the code syntax perspective. So comments, like any other programming language, you begin with comments, right? So you have both the varieties of comments, like line comments, right? Like line comments, or these block comments, like what you see it in kind of C++ or in Java languages. Even though it is not compulsory in some places, terminating the lines of code using semicolons is still considered to be a very good practice. So that means, for example, if you see this line, there is no semicolon, it still is acceptable. But we suggest to go with semicolon termination. Okay. Then, what is the usual approach to start learning any programming language? Just by printing hello world. In case of JavaScript, the way to print is by calling something called console.log. Console.log. The console represents the console of the system on which the JavaScript is running. It may be console of the browser, or it may be console of the Node.js, depending on whether you are running it on the browser or on the Node.js machine or wherever it is. The console, its meaning changes, right? If it is on the browser, you'll be seeing open the console of the browser. That is where you see these print statements. If it is a Node machine, you'll see there it in the console of the Node itself. You can print messages of various levels like console.error, console.log, console.debug, and etc. But typically you use for printing log statements, you use log. And it takes a string as a parameter or any supported object of JavaScript which can be converted automatically into string can be used over here. So a simple string here, we are using a static string, hello world, and we are using it, we are keeping them within a pair of double quotes. You can also use it in single quotes, but typically you go with the double quotes. And always prefer const keyword unless they are variables. Always prefer const unless they are variables. The people who are using the JavaScript that was not based on standards earlier used to use var as a keyword to declare variables. No longer that is recommended. It is better to use const if it is a constant or let if it is a variable. If variable means what? Its value is going to change during the run of the program. If in case you know that it is not going to change its value during the execution of that program, then why should we declare it as a variable? Declare it as a constant. So constant is the first choice because the systems are optimized for constants. For example, there is a string called uname I am declaring here. You see, nowhere I am declaring it as a string. I'm just writing the value within the double quotes. Automatically, the system will detect that it is a string and it also a constant. And then when I'm trying to print, you see here, I'm again preparing a string here by concatenating maybe one string and another string over here. You can use plus operator to concatenate the strings wherever you want, which gives you another string. There is one more way to deal with these strings. They are called as template strings. They are called as template strings. The template strings use backticks as the enclosures, not the single quotes, not the double quotes, rather backticks as the enclosures. For example, you see here, I am declaring a constant called uname with a value Krishna Mohan here. And in the console log, what I am doing, I am giving backticks. See, the symbols are backticks here. The symbols are backticks. Yeah, you see it on the just below the escape on Mac machines or wherever. Just check where it is. And how it is useful, I can write my string as a usual string. For example, hello. I don't use plus operator and all blah, blah, blah. Rather, I can simply say hello within the backticks, hello, dollar, and a pair of curly braces. A pair of curly braces, and in which I can refer to any constant or any variable or even expressions also. At the runtime, what happens is that the things that you write within these curly braces, they get resolved to a string and they will be replaced with by that particular value. So since uname is resolved to Krishna Mohan, the outcome will be hello Krishna Mohan. It automatically comes there. So wherever you are trying to build strings by some computation, go for template strings. They're always useful for you. If they are static strings, go with single quotes and double quotes. Now let us look at expressions. Like in any other programming language, I am sure you know some other programming language other than just this JavaScript. Like in any other places, the expressions, their resolution follows the similar rules. There is nothing specific or nothing great about it. So for example, usual stuff, right? First you have the data, then computation, then output. Typically that is the flow we follow. So here we are looking at some example. Let's say we are declaring a principal as 1000, time as 12, rate of interest as 6. All of them are constants because I know I'm not going to change those values within this program. Similarly, I'm computing the interest by using our simple interest formula, right? PTR by 100 or PRT by 100, whatever it is. So that is also a constant. I am not going to recompute the interest anywhere. So it is also constant. Now I am using template strings to print everything. So principal rupees 1000 that gets printed here. Rate of interest 6% gets printed over here. Time 12 months gets printed over here. Simple interest rupees, whatever is the value that gets computed here is going to be printed over here. You may say like, Krishna, why we need to do this expression here and store it in this particular place and then refer it here? Can we write this entire expression here? The answer is, of course, yes, you can do it. Only if just for the readability's sake, I split it into multiple lines, but you may, as long as your code is expressive, you can actually go ahead with that option as well. Whatever you write within these curly braces, they are always resolved. They're always executed as if like that is JavaScript code only, not static strings. Then you normally write applications with a lot of, by keeping in mind that you want to reuse the code that you write. You want to reuse it in multiple places. You want to use it in multiple places, obviously, so that you can improve the rate of or the returns on whatever you have invested in. What is the basic unit of reusable code? Function. Whether you go in C language or C++ or any other language, you typically have functions. So how do we create functions in JavaScript? There are predominantly two ways of doing it. One is the traditional way. You use the keyword function to create a function or to define a new function. You use def in Python, right? Something similar to that. Here it is, function is the keyword. Name the function, whatever it is, whatever you are declaring, and specify the arguments. Specify the arguments. You don't specify types anywhere, you see. Nowhere you are specifying any types because JavaScript do not allow you to specify types. They are dynamically computed. So what is the function name? Compute simple interest. We typically use camel casing. We don't use hyphens, underscores, anything. Rather, we just only create uppercase words when you are concatenating them. So how do you find the interest? Same formula, and you are printing the results over here. So when somebody calls this function, it computes the simple interest and prints those results. And how do you invoke the function? Very simple. Just call that function by name and pass the parameters. So 1000 takes the place of principal, 6 takes the place of rate of interest, and 12 takes the place of time. This is normal, usual functions. JavaScript also introduced something called arrow functions. JavaScript also introduced something called arrow functions. Our strong recommendation is that try using arrow functions wherever possible. Get that practice. Get that practice as much as possible. So I'm rewriting the same function once again. So what is the function? It is compute simple interest. That is the name of the function. I'm not using function as a keyword. Rather, I am immediately giving equal symbol, and there I am using a what do you call parenthesis in which I have all the arguments, followed by an arrow kind of a symbol. This is why these functions are called as arrow functions. And then you write the rest of the body. This body is same. There is nothing different here. So what does it mean? In the traditional functions, you use function as the keyword. Here you are not doing it. You are using constant. This is also just a constant. You are not going to reassign some other function. Not a good idea, right? So that's why you are declaring it as a constant. And how do I know that it is a function? Because of the presence of this part. You need to have these parentheses with the parameters. Parenthesis with the parameters followed by arrow. Arrow is the actual one. Remaining things are all optional depending on various things. This is how you write the arrow functions. Why this is interesting? Why we are recommending arrow functions? It makes your code more and more expressive. You will see one by one. Now, so earlier these functions, whatever functions we have written, they were just only printing the data. They were not returning anything back. That's why we call these functions as void functions. They are not really returning anything. Now let us see how a function can return a value. So a traditional function I'm writing again, compute simple interest, PRT values I'm taking as arguments and computing the interest and returning the interest. This is traditional function definition. Now I want to call this function somewhere here. To call these values, either I declare these values here and refer them, or I can hard code like this, one of the ways. Now, because I'm directly calling the values with 1000, 6, and 12, this part of the code is redundant now. This part of the code is redundant. And this function, because it is returning the interest, we need to store that in some value, some constant or variable. So here I am storing it in a constant called interest. If you are assuming that the return variable name and the variable that is holding the result must be same, there is nothing like that. There is nothing like that. The remaining things, once you get the results, the interest, you want to, print the final results here, that you are doing by using the usual console log statements. Now focus more on the function definition. I'm using traditional function. Now let me do it in slightly differently. This is also a traditional function. Same name, same arguments, but I am having only one line of code. Everything else is same. Where is the difference? Here I am storing this interest into a constant and then returning it. Here I'm not doing it. Whatever is the value that system computes, I'm returning it directly. So this is more compact code. Okay, functionally nothing different, but this is more expressive. You are writing less amount of code to get the same result. Now let me make this as an arrow function. So constant function became constant. Function name is same. All our arguments are now put under this within these parentheses. An arrow came here, and then within the curly braces, the same code I'm writing. The rest of the code is same. Now see the real magic. So here, because my code, the body of the function is having only one line of code, right? Body of the function is having only one line of the code. You can remove these curly braces and return statement and just write the body of the code just like this. Just like this. This is where I was saying like this is more expressive. There are many places you will see in our session itself that many places you will be writing these kind of one-liner functions. In all those places, when you switch to arrow functions, your code becomes a lot expressive. Okay, so now move on. Let us look at decisions. How do we take decisions in JavaScript? Again, usual suspects only. Like in the other programming languages, you have if-else statements, switch statements, and etc. Right? That is how you branch out the execution paths. If you want to choose between only few possible paths of the execution, go for if-else. Let's say if something, then do some. If something else, do that one. If something else, do this one. Fine. But if you want to say like do this for XYZ, do this for ABC, do this for something else, do this for something else. If you keep on writing several of such kind of if-elses, then the code may not be looking very, readable. So only when you have very few possible paths, typically 1 or 2 or 3, 4, maximum 4. 4 itself is a more huge number. For example, here I am writing a new function called isEven. How do I say it is a function? Because there is a parenthesis here and an arrow here. Parenthesis is optional when you have only one argument, remember. Even though I'm writing it here, but if it is only one argument, you need not to write even parenthesis also. If there are no arguments or if there are more than one argument, then parentheses are mandatory syntactically. As a habit, I typically keep the parenthesis always. So parenthesis and arrow, that is what makes isEven a function. And what is it doing? If you know the modulus operator, right, with 2 as the value. So if the number is divisible by 2 and leaves 0 as a reminder, you return true. If this condition is not satisfied, then come to this place and return false. And return false. So how many branches I am having? Only one branch. If it is the case, do this. Otherwise, do this. So in these kind of situations where you have only couple of possible paths of execution, choose the if-else statements. See here I have only if. Here I am using if-else. Here because it is returning immediately, this becomes unreachable code in case if it is even. If it is not even, it comes here. So our logic is good. Whereas here, what I am doing, if is even number, I am passing some number. Here number is 5. I'm checking if is 5 even. If it is true, then print this. Else, print this. Right? If it is true, it is even number. If it is false, it is odd number. See, I'm again using those template strings. I'm again using the template strings. Here I'll have to use the else statement because I'm not returning immediately. If I'm not writing else and if I'm writing this code directly, then what happens? It will print this in case of it is even, and nevertheless, it will definitely print this line also, irrespective whether it is even or odd. So use that else statement, else block legitimately. Now observe this line of code once again. So I'm having is even, I'm having some expression which may return either true or false, depending on which I am doing either one or the other thing. Whenever you have that option, go for ternary operator. Go for something called ternary operator. So I'm writing the same function, isEven function once again, slightly differently. I'm taking n as an argument. It is an arrow function. And what is the statement here? The first part of the ternary operator, you know it in C language also, right? And Python everywhere. So n modulus 2, it may return either true or false. If it is true, the value is going to be true. If it is false, the value is going to be false. No matter what is the value, because it is a single liner function of arrow function, whatever may be that value, that gets returned automatically. Then what happened? Again, this line of code became too expressive. That's why we recommend you to practice using the arrow functions wherever possible. In case you have several possible paths of execution, then go for switch statement. Switch comes with case, right? Again, this is nothing new. It is there in the same other language also. So this is a function called lookup. It is taking city as the argument. Here I'm not using parenthesis. As I mentioned, parenthesis is optional if it is having only one argument. And this is an arrow function, and this is the body. What is the body? Switch city. Means you pass the city value, and based on the value of the city, it will be dealing with one of these cases. If the case is like if the city is Bengaluru, then return Karnataka. Let's say these states and their capitals. So if the city name is Bengaluru, then it returns Karnataka. If the city name is Hyderabad, then it returns Telangana, and so on. If it is not any of these city names, in such a case, it comes to default. And in this case, it is returning not found. That city is not found in our function. One thing you need to remember is that since we are doing return in each of the case blocks, it is not proceeding further. But it is not always the case. You may not return. You may execute some code and keep it there. In such a case, the switch statement behaves as if like an entry point into one of these cases. If I say city is Chennai, let's say, then it enters at the case 3 where Chennai is the key value and executes the code whatever it is here. If it is not having a return statement, it goes to the next case and so on till the end of the block. That we need to keep in the mind. For example, here city name is Amaravati and what is the state? So we are calling the lookup function by passing the city name. So according to this, if it is Amaravati, it is supposed to return Andhra Pradesh, and that is where it is saying like so and so city is the capital of so and so states. Observe the back ticks. Okay. Now iterations. A traditional for loop that you all know, maybe we can begin with that for now. A for loop starts with 3 clauses, right? The initializer, the condition, and the increment, whatever, increment or decrement or mover. So here I'm writing a function called print table with one parameter. This is an arrow function, and what is it doing? For let I equal to 1, I value is 1, and this value of I will keep changing in each of the iteration, right? That's why we are calling it as let. Const for constant, let for variables. So we start from I equal to 1, and as long as it is less than or equal to 10, we keep on incrementing this value of I after executing this block. So initially it is going to print 1, what is the number here? Whatever number we pass. For example, here we are calling this function with number 5. Then what will happen? 5 multiplied by 1 equal to, you see, I am directly writing the expression. Here it is number asterisk I. So those values gets multiplied. And so on. It will just go on like that. And you know the while loop, do while loop, and other traditional loops, right? They're all still there. But they are not that popular these days. Many people just go with the for statement as a general approach. Now let us look at the data structures. 2 important data structures of JavaScript we'll be now looking at. One is arrays. The other one is what we call the objects. Let's start with arrays first, because they are very much familiar to all of us, no matter which programming language background we are having. So arrays are a linear, iterable collection of infinite number of elements. See, there are a lot of words here. Linear, so they just keep on growing in one single direction. Iterable, you can iterate through them. You can go through each of those elements one after other. Collection, there are many values in a given array. There is no limit on the size. It is infinite number of elements. Your memory, your system is the only limiting factor. So how do you create arrays? Let's say I am creating an empty array in this case. Just use square brackets for arrays. This is an empty array. Here it is an array with couple of values. It is an array with initialized values, 2 values here. Once you have an array either way, if you want to add more elements to that array, what you need to do? Use the function called push. For example, here states.push Kerala. So the array will have Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, followed by Kerala as the third element. You can always fetch the size of the array. And the array elements are accessed through their index position, and index starts from 0. That is important, like in any other programming language. So for example, if I say states 0, what is what is there in the 0th position? It is Andhra Pradesh. So that will be returned and assigned to the variable called state. And then there are lots of functions of arrays that are of lot of use. Some of them we are just writing here, but there are many. Any array that contains several elements can be converted into a string with those values just separated by commas. You use toString operation. If you want to return a string of array elements with a custom separator, join is also like toString only. In toString, the values are just returned as a string with comma separation. If you want to use some other separator instead of comma, you go for join. It accepts the special character, maybe hyphen or whatever. You can use it. Maybe sometimes it is useful. We have used push function over here, right? To add element to an array towards the end. Pop is opposite to it. It removes an element from the last element from the array and returns whatever element it removed. And shift removes from the beginning of the array. That means it removes the first element from the array. And reverse, it reverses the elements in the array. Sort, it sorts the elements in a given array. Splice intertwines elements into an array. So you have an existing array with 10 elements. You want to insert 3 more elements to that array. Insert. It's not like you are appending towards the end or in the beginning. Anywhere you want to insert these new 3 elements. In such case, you use this splice function. Go and look at it. And but the thing here is like the reverse, this sort, all these guys gives you or makes or they actually change the original array. If you say you have an array and you are reversing it, so the original array gets modified by reversing its elements. Instead, you want to keep the original array as it is, but you want to get another array with the elements reversed. Then you go for 2 reversed. Similarly, for array sort, you have 2 sorted. Similarly, for splice, you have 2 spliced. All right. So splice, as I mentioned, it is to insert few more elements into an array at any part, at any position. Slice is opposite to it. You want to take out some of the elements from a given array from any position and create a new array out of those items that you took out. That is slice. So if you haven't used some of these functions, go and refer to the documentation and try on your own, right? Try on your own. Now let us look at how do you traverse through arrays? How do you traverse through arrays? We have already seen the traditional for loop, right? It still works for us. So for example, I have the states of, let's say 5 states I have written here, 5 or 6, 5 states. And I have the function called print states, which is not taking any arguments. If there are no arguments, then giving the empty parenthesis is a must. in arrow function syntax. And what I'm doing, I'm starting index position at 0. You know, the arrays always starts from index 0, right? So I'm starting with index 0 as long as the index is less than the length of it. What is the length? 5. So as long as the index value is 4 or less than 4, print the values. What is the, how am I printing? I am printing the index value, that is 0, and the value at that position within the states. Value at that position within the states. So what will it print? It will print 0 is Andhra Pradesh, 1 dot Karnataka, 2 dot Kerala, 3 dot Tamil Nadu, 4 dot Telangana. I'm sorry, there is a typo in Telangana. Otherwise, it just works that way. This is one way of doing it. There is one more way. You have something called for in loop. There is one more thing called for in loop. What we have seen earlier is a traditional for loop, whereas here it is for in loop. It traverses through an array like in the past, but in a slightly different manner. So I'm having the same code actually. So the same typo is continuing here. I'm absolutely sorry for that. So the print states function, what is it doing now? It is using for statement, but it is not using those 3 clauses. Rather, it is using the in clause. So it takes the collection or the iterable. In this case, the iterable is the array. So it takes the array and it iterates through each of the elements within the array and gets the index. It gets the indexes of the array. So the in function gets you the index positions so that you can access those values like in the past. So you need not to verify what is the state length and etc. It just traverses through the array as long as it has elements. There is one more thing called for off. You see here, say everything else is same. For state of states. So in the earlier case, in each of the iteration, it picks up the index, the current index within the array. Whereas here, when you are using off, it picks up the value in the current location. Means it directly gets the values of the state name, so you can directly go and print them. So master these 3, traditional for in, and for off. All these 3 are very important. There is one more thing, for each as a function. Those are operators, for each is a function. On an array, states is an array, right? On an array, you can simply use for each and it accepts a function as an argument. It accepts a function as an argument. And that is an arrow function. And that arrow function is having one argument. In this case, I'm just locally calling it as state. See, function arguments are always local variables, right? So state is my local variable name and I'm printing that state. But who will give the value of this state? That is the beauty of this for each function. So for each function on a given array, it will iterate through all the elements or each element at a time from this array and pushes that value into this function. Or for each of the values in the given array, it executes this function by having that current element as the value, as the argument, with whatever local name you give here. Very important thing, get it done. Get full command on this one also. Because these are all very important when you are writing any sizable modern JavaScript applications, without which your code becomes a lot bloated. Okay, now you have few other functions like find function, filter function, and map function. If you understood the for each function, you can understand these functions also easily. So in the find function, right? Find also takes a function as an argument. And that should be a predicate. That should be a predicate. What does that mean? The function must return a Boolean value. For each will not return anything. For each takes a void function. It is not returning anything. It is just printing the value. Whereas here it should return what I call a Boolean value. That's why we call it as predicate. So what is that we are doing here? It is like a logical condition statement we are giving. Predicate is that only that mean, right? A predicate means that only. So state dot starts with K means if the current state or whatever state that is passed to this function, if that word starts with the word letter K, then it is returning true. Otherwise it returns false. So now what this find function does, it will execute this function, whatever function you pass, for each of the elements within the states unless it hits at least one Boolean true. For example, in this case, first element is Andhra Pradesh. So it executes this function. State becomes Andhra Pradesh. Does it start with K? The answer is no, false. So find function goes to the next element, that is Karnataka. It starts with K, of course, yes. Then find function stops there and returns true immediately. It returns true immediately and gives you that value also. And not returning true, it returns the value that it found. It won't even go to Kerala, which is also starting with K. You see, a function applies a Boolean function like this predicate and returns the first matching element. Karnataka is the first matching element here, so it returns that. Instead, if you say like, no, not like that, Krishna, I want to have all the elements that are matching that condition. All the elements that are matching the condition. In such a case, you will be using this filter function. Everything else is same, the same predicate, but it won't stop after the first match. It will continue till it covers all the elements. Till it covers all the elements and returns all the matching values. So in this case, it is going to return an array with Karnataka and Kerala as the return values. An array with those two values, it will return. Another thing is map function. A map is like, I give you some value, you apply some function on that and give me back the return value. It's something like that. So that is what mapping is, right? Anywhere mapping means that one only. So you see here, for each of the states within this particular, in this array, it applies this function. So in the first iteration, it is going to be Andhra Pradesh. And what is it going to return back? Same Andhra Pradesh, but in uppercase letters. Next, Karnataka. It is not in upper cases. It returns an uppercase value of Karnataka. Same with Kerala, same with Tamil Nadu, same with Telangana. That means if I apply map on an array with 10 elements, I'm going to get back all the 10 elements with or without modification, depending on, or with or without mapping, depending on what you are writing here as the code. You may write any amount of code over there. It's not just only changing uppercase or lowercase. You may write 100 lines of code, depending on which you may do one or other thing. One very interesting thing about map functions is that maybe I may have a list of employees, let's say. I may give employee ID and it may return the names of each of those employees. So I may give 10 employee IDs. It returns me an array with the corresponding names of those employees. All right. So such kind of interesting this it can do. And one more thing is spread operator. Triple dot. Right? A spread operator you can identify because of these triple dots as prefix. This is basically to insert elements of an array into another array and create a new array out of it. You have an existing array. You want to spread the elements of this existing array into a newly created array. In such case, you will be using this spread operator. For example, I have the states with some 5 states. I'm having that array, right? I want to create with union territories also. Means I want to have all the states plus some of these union territories as well. So what am I doing? I'm not repeating the state names here. I'm just spreading the values of the existing states array. So there are 5 values. All those 5 values will appear here as the values of the new array, followed by the 3 new values. All right. So this is JavaScript arrays. Now let's look at JavaScript objects. This is another interesting data structure. The objects in the JavaScript follow the so-called JSON or JavaScript object notation. JSON is actually a network protocol kind of a thing. It is a data interchange format, we can say, not a network protocol, but typically used for interchanging the data across applications over the network, typically only. But even internally also we use the same JSON format, but as a string, of course. So what is a JavaScript object? Like any other object, it is just a map of keys and values. Key type must be string always. Value can be of any object, means value can be a number or a string or a boolean. It can be another object, it can be another array, it can be anything, as long as JavaScript supports that object. So to create an empty map or empty JSON, you just use curly braces. In case of array, you use square brackets, whereas here you use a pair of curly braces. If you want to create an initialized JSON, within the curly braces, you'll be writing the key value pairs. A key and its corresponding value must be separated by a colon symbol. And that kind of key value must be separated from other key values using a comma separation. Keys are always within quotes, means they are strings. Values can be anything. Here in this case, the value is also a string. It is just a case. It's not that always the values are going to be strings. You may create arrays of objects, or objects may in turn contain arrays. It can be anything. For example, here I am having another JSON. Another array. This is an array here, right? Square brackets. But what are those individual values? Individual JSON objects. So this JSON is having two keys, state and capital. Another one, state and capital. So that way, that combination, the arrays of objects and objects of arrays, everything is possible. You typically access these elements through keys, right? For example, if I'm having a states JSON with keys as Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka, if I want to access the values, then I'll have to use, in the case of arrays, you use index positions, whereas here you'll have to use the key. You'll have to use the keys. So if I say states and Andhra Pradesh as the key, then automatically I'll get Amravati as the value. If they are in arrays, as usual. So states is an array in which you are getting the first element, not the 0th one. That means this particular JSON that is living there. In that JSON, state is a key. So this part will return Karnataka as the value. Perfect. You can use for in to traverse through the iterable JSON object. JSON objects are also iterable based on through their keys, of course. So here I have the states, all the 5 states, let's say. Here I think this is corrected. It is now Telangana properly. And when we say print states, what is it doing? It is for loop with in clause. What this in clause is doing, it is picking up the key. It is picking up the key. In the array case, when we say in, it was returning the index. Here index is the key. So that's how you are getting the key. So it is going to print the state, means it will print Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Telangana as the values. If you want to print values also, then this is how you do it. You get the key and you access that value within the JSON by supplying the key. Then it will print Andhra Pradesh arrow Amravati, Karnataka arrow Bangalore, and so on. That is for in. All right, so these are JavaScript objects. You also have, one more thing, that is a spread operator. Just like in the case of arrays, here also you can use spread operator. If you want to copy elements of a given JSON into another JSON. For example, I'm having states with some 5 key value pairs. Now I want to update that states with 3 more union territories. I don't want to repeat those 5 states once again by writing. Rather, I just want to spread them over here. So all I'm doing is like I'm getting the existing states, triple dot. So I'm spreading them plus I'm adding 3 more key value pairs. This entire thing is going to be now states. Means states is no longer constant. Here I have some value. Here I am assigning a new JSON here. That's why I am using let as the keyword. All right. So this is some of the fundamentals of JavaScript that we should always be good at to do anything useful for developing modern applications these days. We have seen basics. We have seen how do we take decisions, how do we iterate through, or how do we do loops. We have seen how do we create functions, 2 ways of using functions. We have seen couple of data structures and some of the important functions in them. Now let us look at a simple illustration. You see here, this is a browser. I have opened the console of this browser. You know, when you, depending on your browser, you'll have to open the console by following their menu structure. Typically, it is under web developer tools. So when you run any Java, if you load any HTML document, client side I'm talking about. If you load any HTML document, if it contains some JavaScript, and if that JavaScript is having any console log statements or console statements, those console output you can see over here under the console tab. As I mentioned, console need not only be for logs. It can be for errors, warnings, info, debug, and etc. In our case, we are writing logs because I enabled everything. Even log statements also appeared. So here I am loading some HTML document in which there is a JavaScript, and that JavaScript is printing these values, saying like employee ID equal to 1, name is this, position is this, and blah, blah, blah. Now let us look at that code, how it looks like. So this is usual suspect, right? This is HTML document with HTML as the root element with the doc type declaration. This is normal header and body. Nothing really great about this. So if I run this one, I'll just get that directory, nothing else. Directory with that line. There is no console at this point. There is no code for that. Now what I'm doing is I'm adding a script tag in the header. And what do I write within that script tag? This one. So simple thing. I have a directory which is an empty JSON. I have an employee ID which is initialized to 0. Looks like this is going to change. That's why it is let. And then I'm writing a function called add, which takes EMP or employee shorthand as the parameter. And what will it do? It will add whatever you pass as an employee to the directory JSON with the key that is computed by pre-incrementing the EID value. Means first time when I call, it becomes directory of 1 equal to whatever employee, directory of 2 equal to whatever employee, and so on. Print is another function because there are no parameters. You have that empty parenthesis, and I'm just printing it using the in class for in. Directory is a JSON which is iterable over their keys. So I'm printing, so each one is a key, right? Whatever we get. So that key is EID. So first it will print employee ID equal to whatever EID that is there in the given JSON element at that point. Then within the directory, against the EID, there is a name field, its value. There is a position field, its corresponding value, and then some line. So see here, when I say add function, when I'm calling add, I'm passing a JSON. Name is this, position is this. Another add function call with some other name and some other position. So then what will happen internally? The directory will be having at 1, it will have Krishna, and at 2, it will have Karuna. These are all JSON objects again. So when we say print, it comes to first value, that is 1. So it will print employee ID 1. Then it prints name, employee ID, that is 1, right? So in the directory, what is the first value? This value. In which name is the key. What is its corresponding value? Krishna Mohan Koyya. So it will print that. So that is how we are seeing these results. Try this out simply. You will try many of such kind of things, in fact. We are not doing any web application at this point of time. We are writing everything to print on the console only, because The day comes when you will be actually developing a interactive user interface. Till then, we'll be having this kind of somewhat dumb applications, but still challenging applications. Okay, so that's it for now. So the summary is this: JavaScript is a general purpose programming language. It is interpreted language. On the client side, it is the browsers who interpret them. And on the server side, it is a node that interprets the JavaScript. ECMS script is the one which specifies the standards for JavaScript, which everyone is following these days. It supports types like numbers, bools, objects, strings, and etc. JavaScript detects the type information of a constant or a variable dynamically. You don't declare them. You use const for declaring constants, let to declare the variables. Let is in the lower case. Sorry for that. Functions can be declared either traditionally or with arrow operator, like what we have seen. And there are many ways to iterate through these iterables, like traditional for loop, for each, for in, for off, and etc. And we have seen linear data structure like array and mapping data structure like JSON. All right. So that's the summary of this particular session. And what next? As we all know, UI for web-based applications is built on these three core technologies: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML and CSS, now you are well versed. JavaScript, just now we have seen that they add behavior because you can develop logic. How do they add behavior to the web application? It's by changing the way the UI appears on the screen, by adding or displaying new elements, or by removing or hiding the existing elements, or repositioning the elements. All right, suddenly a video appears, means you are adding a new video element dynamically. Suddenly the password dialog disappears, means you are hiding an element or you are removing the element completely. So such behavior you can build using JavaScript. In response to events, for example, on a login screen, you click on sign in, then error messages may appear or your home screen may appear. This is all depending on what you click, where do you click, and what is going to happen with respect to the behavior. For all this to happen, you need to have something called DOM API, which offers programmatic interface to do all these manipulations like adding, displaying, removing, hiding, or repositioning the elements of a HTML DOM tree. So in some other session, we'll be looking at that DOM API. For now, that's it. Thank you.